Number. Part 1. The last transmission. The message came at 3:47 inches the morning. Earth time. It was a distress call from the Alori homeworld, a planet 17,000 light-years away. The signal was weak and broken, but the words were clear enough. The Vethrak Dominion had come for them. Their cities were burning. Their fleets were destroyed. They were begging for help that would never arrive. Captain Daniel Cole stood alone in his quarters aboard the USS Blackstar, listening to the transmission for the third time. The voice belonged to an Alori diplomat he had met once, 3 years ago, during a secret meeting between Earth and the Galactic Coalition. She had been kind and hopeful. She had believed that the younger species of the galaxy could stand together against the Dominion. Now her voice cracked with fear as she described warships filling the sky like a swarm of insects. The transmission ended with static. Then, silence. Daniel closed his eyes and took a slow breath. The Alori were the 17th species to fall. 17 civilizations, some of them millions of years old, had been crushed under the boots of the Vethrak Empire. Their worlds had been stripped of resources, their people had been scattered or enslaved, their histories had been erased, and now the Dominion was turning its eyes toward Earth. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the darkness of space. The Blackstar was hidden deep within the asteroid fields of Ceres, wrapped in layers of technology that made her invisible to every known sensor. She had been built in absolute secrecy over the course of 12 years. Only a handful of people in the entire human government knew she existed. The ship was humanity's insurance policy, a weapon of last resort, a nightmare made of metal and fire. Daniel had commanded her for 3 years, training his crew in silence, running simulations, preparing for a day he hoped would never come. But hope was a luxury he could no longer afford. His communicator beeped. He answered it without looking away from the stars. "Captain, you need to come to the bridge." It was Commander Laura Bennett, his first officer. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the tension beneath it. The Vethrak have sent a message to Earth. He was on the bridge within 2 minutes. The crew was already assembled at their stations. Marcus Grant sat at the weapons console, his jaw tight. Katie Morrison monitored the engineering readouts, her fingers moving across the controls with nervous energy. Vincent Perry studied the tactical display, where hundreds of red dots represented the enemy fleet. Megan Shaw listened to intercepted communications through her earpiece. Chris Dalton waited at the helm, hands resting on the controls. Laura stood at the center of the bridge, waiting for him. She was tall and composed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had served with Daniel for 8 years across 3 different ships. He trusted her, more than anyone in the galaxy. "Play it," Daniel said. The main screen flickered to life. A Vethrak appeared, his gray skin stretched over a skull-like face, his black eyes gleaming with cold intelligence. He wore the ceremonial armor of the Dominion's High Command, covered in symbols that represented conquered worlds. "People of Earth," the Vethrak said. His voice was deep and smooth, almost pleasant. "I am Admiral Keth Voran, commander of the Dominion's 3rd Fleet. Your coalition allies have fallen. Your protectors have abandoned you. You stand alone against the greatest power the galaxy has ever known." "Tensure." The Admiral leaned forward slightly, and something like amusement crossed his alien features. "We have studied your species. We know your military strength. We know your weaknesses. You cannot resist us. You cannot defeat us. You can only choose how you wish to die." He paused. "Surrender your world, and we will grant you the mercy of servitude. Resist, and we will reduce your planet to ash and scatter your bones across the void." The screen went dark. Silence filled the bridge. Daniel looked at his crew, seeing the fear they were trying to hide. They were brave. All of them. They had volunteered for a mission that might never end in anything but death. But hearing the enemy speak so casually about the destruction of their home was something different. "How many ships?" Daniel asked. Vincent pulled up the data. 312 capital ships. Approximately 2,000 support vessels. Combined crew complement of over 4 million. And our official fleet? 42 combat-ready vessels. maybe a dozen more that could be pressed into service. The numbers were impossible. Earth's entire military might was barely a fraction of what the Vethrak had brought. Even if every human ship fought to the last, they would be crushed in hours. But the Vethrak had made a mistake, a critical one. They had counted Earth's official ships. They had studied Earth's public military records. They had calculated human strength based on what they could see. They did not know about the Blackstar. Daniel walked to the center of the bridge and looked at each of his crew members in turn. These were the people he would take into battle. These were the people who would either save humanity or die trying. "The Dominion thinks they know us," he said quietly. "They think we are weak. They think we will break." He let the words hang in the air for a moment. "They are wrong." "How?" "Infound." He turned to Laura. "Commander, begin pre-launch sequence. We leave the asteroid field in 6 hours. Laura nodded. "Destination?" "The Vethrak fleet. We are going to introduce ourselves." Katie looked up from her console. "Captain, the ship has never been tested in actual combat. We have run thousands of simulations. But, I know," Daniel said, "but we do not have the luxury of waiting. Every hour we delay is an hour the enemy uses to prepare. We need to hit them before they reach Earth. We need to hit them before they know we exist." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Rules of engagement?" Daniel considered the question. The Vethrak had conquered 17 species. They had killed billions. They had offered humanity a choice between slavery and death. "No mercy," he said. "No warnings, no survivors. We hit them hard, and we do not stop until their fleet is dust." The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then, one by one, the crew nodded. Megan began jamming enemy communications. Vincent started plotting approach vectors. Katie ran final diagnostics on the engines. Marcus activated the weapon systems. Chris brought the helm online. Laura stepped beside Daniel and spoke softly. "Do you think we can win?" 4. He looked at her. And for just a moment, the weight of command lifted from his shoulders. She was asking him, not as a first officer to her captain, but as a friend. "I think we have to," he said. "Because if we fail, there will be no one left to remember that we tried." The Blackstar's engines hummed to life. The great ship stirred from her long sleep. Systems activating one after another. Power flowing through conduits that had waited years for this moment. Outside, the asteroids drifted in their endless silence. The stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in the darkness, a fleet of monsters waited, not knowing that death was coming for them. Part 2. Ghost Protocol. Admiral Keth Voran stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Dominion's Fury, and watched his fleet move through space like a great metal river. 300 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. 2,000 support vessels carrying supplies, troops, and weapons. This was the mightiest force the Dominion had assembled in a century, and it was all aimed at one small blue world called Earth. He had studied the humans carefully. They were a young species, barely 1,000 years into space travel. They were clever and stubborn, yes, but they were also divided and weak. Their governments fought among themselves. Their military was outdated. Their technology was decades behind the Dominion's worst ships. Conquering them would be easy, almost boring. Keth Voran allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. After this campaign, he would be promoted to Grand Admiral. He would have his choice of conquered worlds. Perhaps he would take Earth for himself, turn it into his personal estate. His thoughts were interrupted by a communication officer approaching with a datapad. "Admiral, we have lost contact with Patrol Group 7. Keth Voran frowned. "Explanation? "Unknown, sir. They were conducting routine sweeps of the outer territories. Their last transmission was normal. Then, nothing. Equipment failure? Possibly. But Patrol Group 4 also went silent 2 hours ago. And Patrol Group 11 before that." The Admiral's frown deepened. 3 patrol groups missing was not a coincidence. But his sensors showed nothing. No enemy ships, no weapons fire, no debris. Send a scout wing to investigate, he ordered. Full sensor sweep. Report anything unusual. R. The officer nodded and hurried away. Keth Voran turned back to the viewport, but the satisfaction he had felt moments ago was gone. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. Aboard the USS Blackstar, Captain Daniel Cole watched the scout wing approach through the tactical display. 6 small ships, fast and well-armed, flying in a standard search pattern. They had no idea the Blackstar was floating less than 50 kilometers from their position. The ship's stealth systems were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. A technology called null field projection wrapped the vessel in a bubble of bent light and scrambled energy, making her invisible to sensors, cameras, and even the naked eye. To the Vethrak scouts, the Blackstar was nothing but empty space. They are scanning the area, Vincent reported from the tactical station. No indication they have detected us. Daniel nodded. Weapons status? Railguns charged and ready, Marcus said. Drone swarms on standby. Waiting for your order. Daniel studied the scout formation. 6 ships, 6 crews who had no idea they were about to die. He felt no pleasure in what he was about to do, but he felt no guilt either. These ships served an empire that had murdered billions. They had come to do the same to Earth. They had made their choice. Now, they would face the consequences. Fire. The Blackstar's railguns were electromagnetic weapons that launched metal projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. There was no flash, no beam, no warning. One moment the 6 scout ships were flying in formation. The next moment they were torn apart by invisible impacts, their hulls shredding like paper, their crews dying before they could even scream. The whole attack took less than 3 seconds. All targets destroyed, Marcus reported. No distress signals transmitted. Daniel allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. Move us to the next position. We have more hunting to do. Over the next 72 hours, the Blackstar became a ghost that haunted the edges of the Vethrak fleet. Patrol after patrol vanished without a trace. Scout wings sent to investigate disappeared as well. No wreckage was ever found. No survivors ever returned. The fear began to spread through the Dominion fleet like a disease. Katie Morrison monitored enemy communications from her engineering station, translating the Vethrak language through the ship's computers. The reports she intercepted grew more panicked by the hour. Crews were refusing to sleep. Officers were arguing with each other, blaming equipment failures and incompetent subordinates. Some ships had reported seeing phantom contacts on their sensors, shapes that appeared for a moment and then vanished. Others claimed to have heard strange sounds through their hulls, like something tapping against the metal. Megan Shaw played one intercepted transmission for the bridge crew. It was a Vethrak officer speaking to his commander, his voice shaking with barely controlled terror. Something is out there, something we cannot see. It is hunting us. I can feel it watching. Please. We need to turn back. We need to. The transmission cut off. That ship had been destroyed 6 minutes later. Laura Bennett stood beside Daniel as they listened. Psychological warfare, she said. You are breaking them before the battle even begins. Fear is a weapon, Daniel replied. The Vethrak have used it against every species they conquered. They made their enemies believe resistance was hopeless. Now we are teaching them what it feels like. She looked at him with something like concern. And what if it does not work? What if they keep coming anyway? Then we kill them the old-fashioned way. He turned to face her. But a frightened enemy makes mistakes. A frightened enemy breaks formation. A frightened enemy is already halfway to defeat. Admiral Keth Voran had stopped sleeping 3 days ago. He stood in his command center, surrounded by reports of missing ships and terrified crews. 47 vessels had vanished. 47 ships and their crews, gone without a single piece of evidence. His officers were whispering about curses and ghosts. His warriors, who had conquered 11 species without flinching, were starting to crack. He refused to believe it was an enemy. The humans did not have this kind of technology. No one in the galaxy did. There had to be another explanation. Equipment failures, navigation errors, perhaps even desertion. But deep in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered a different truth. Something was hunting them. Something they could not see or fight or understand. Something that killed without warning and disappeared without a trace. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Keth Voran felt the cold touch of fear. He made a decision. No more patrols. No more scouts. He would keep his fleet together in tight formation and push straight toward Earth. Whatever was out there could not possibly stand against 300 warships fighting as one. He gave the order. The fleet changed course, forming a massive wall of metal and firepower aimed directly at the human homeworld. On the bridge of the Blackstar, Daniel Cole watched the enemy formation shift. "They are consolidating," Vincent reported. "Moving toward Earth at maximum speed. No more patrols." Daniel had expected this. The harassment campaign had done its job. The enemy was scared and angry, abandoning caution in favor of raw aggression. They wanted to reach Earth and burn something. They wanted to feel powerful again. That was exactly what he needed. "How long until they reach the Kepler threshold?" he asked. 18 hours at current speed. The Kepler threshold was the last line of defense before Earth. Beyond that point, the planet would be within range of enemy weapons. Earth's defense fleet was already gathering there. 42 ships preparing to make a desperate last stand. Daniel turned to his crew. They had been fighting in the shadows for 3 days, striking from darkness, never revealing themselves. But that phase was over. The real battle was about to begin. "Set course for the Kepler threshold," he ordered. "Maximum speed. It is time to stop hiding." Katie looked up from her console. "We are really going to do this? One ship against 300? Daniel smiled, though there was no humor in it. "One ship is all we need. The Vethrak have never seen what humanity can build when we are desperate. They are about to learn." The Blackstar turned toward Earth, her engines burning bright, racing to meet the storm that was coming. Behind her, the Vethrak fleet followed, not knowing they were chasing their own destruction. Part 3. The Wrath emerges. Commander Patricia Lane stood on the bridge of the USS Constellation, flagship of Earth's defense fleet. She was 53 years old and had served in the Space Navy for 30 years. She had fought pirates, survived border skirmishes, and led rescue missions in the most dangerous regions of human space. But nothing had prepared her for what she saw on her tactical display. 300 Vethrak warships filled the screen, a wall of red dots moving toward Earth like a slow tide of blood. Behind her, the 42 ships of humanity's official fleet waited in formation, good ships with brave crews. But she was not a fool. She knew the math. They were going to die today. All of them. Her only hope was to buy time. Maybe the civilians could evacuate to underground shelters. Maybe some colony ships could escape to the outer territories. Maybe something of humanity would survive. She opened a channel to her fleet. "All ships, this is Commander Lane. The enemy will be in weapons range in 15 minutes. We will engage them and hold the line as long as possible." She paused, searching for words. "I know the odds. You know the odds. But we are not fighting for victory today. We are fighting for our families, our homes, and everyone we love. Make every shot count. Make them pay for every inch." The channel filled with acknowledgments. 42 captains, ready to die for their world. Patricia turned back to the viewport and watched the Vethrak fleet approach. Somewhere down there, on the blue planet behind her, her daughter was probably watching the news, wondering if her mother would come home. She would not. Patricia had accepted that. But she would make her death mean something. "Enemy fleet entering weapons range in 10 minutes, her tactical officer reported. Patricia straightened her uniform. "All hands to battle stations. Prepare to..." She stopped. Something had appeared on her sensors. A single contact, emerging from nowhere, directly between her fleet and the enemy. A ship. Massive and dark. Unlike anything in human records. "What is that?" she demanded. Her sensor officer stared at his screen in confusion. "Unknown vessel," It just appeared out of nowhere. No warp signature. No engine trail. It is like it materialized from empty space. The vessel was enormous, easily twice the size of any ship in her fleet. Its hull was black and angular, covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays. It looked like something built for war and nothing else. Then a transmission came through on all frequencies. Earth Defense Fleet, this is Captain Daniel Cole of the USS Blackstar. We are here to assist. Maintain your position and let us handle the heavy lifting. Patricia stared at the screen. She had never heard of the Blackstar. She had never heard of Captain Daniel Cole. But the ship floating between her fleet and the enemy was very real, and it was definitely human. Captain Cole, she said carefully. I do not know who you are or where you came from, but you are one ship against 300. You cannot possibly, with respect, Commander, watch and learn. The Blackstar's weapon systems came online. Admiral Kethvorin saw the human vessel appear on his sensors and felt confusion wash over him. One ship? The humans were sending one ship to face his armada? Were they insane? Or simply stupid? No matter. One more target to destroy. All forward batteries, he ordered. Destroy that vessel. 50 Vethrak warships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward the black ship. Enough firepower to crack a moon. The Blackstar moved. She did not dodge like a normal vessel. She flickered, vanishing from one position and appearing in another faster than the eye could follow. The wall of weapons fire passed through empty space. Not a single shot connected, and then the Blackstar fired back. Marcus Grant had spent 12 years designing the weapon systems aboard the Blackstar. He had studied every conflict in human history, every alien technology recovered from crashed vessels, every theoretical paper on advanced warfare. The result was a ship that carried weapons the galaxy had never imagined. The Cascade missiles launched first. Each missile split into 100 smaller warheads in flight, which split into 100 more. A single volley became a cloud of 10,000 projectiles that overwhelmed the Vethrak point defense systems and tore through their hulls like rain through paper. 15 ships died in the first 10 seconds. The antimatter lances came next. Thin beams of pure annihilation that cut through Vethrak shields as if they did not exist. Where the beams touched metal, the metal ceased to exist, converted instantly into energy. Ships were sliced in half. Their crews vaporized before they could understand what was happening. 20 more ships fell in the next 20 seconds. Chris Dalton piloted the Blackstar through the enemy formation with movements that should have been impossible. The ship's inertial dampeners were so advanced that the crew barely felt the forces that would have crushed any normal vessel. He spun the ship around enemy fire, threading through gaps that seemed too small, positioning her for perfect attack angles again and again. Katie Morrison pushed the engines beyond their rated limits, channeling power from life support, from gravity generators, from everything that was not essential to combat. Warning lights flashed across her console. The ship groaned under the strain. She ignored it all and gave the captain everything she had. Megan Shaw broadcast the battle on every frequency, sending the images across the galaxy for anyone to see. The Alory remnants received it. The scattered survivors of a dozen conquered species received it. The Vethrak homeworld received it. Everyone saw what one human ship was doing to the mightiest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. On the bridge of the Constellation, Commander Patricia Lane watched in stunned silence as the Blackstar carved through the enemy like a blade through water. Ships that had seemed invincible minutes ago were now burning wreckage. The great Vethrak formation was dissolving into chaos as captains broke ranks to flee or attempted desperate attacks that accomplished nothing. "My God," her tactical officer whispered. "What is that thing?" No, Patricia did not answer. She was too busy watching a legend being born. Admiral Kethvorin screamed orders that no one obeyed. His fleet was falling apart. His warriors were panicking. His commanders were dying faster than he could replace them. The black ship was everywhere. One moment it was on his port side, destroying a cruiser. The next moment it was behind him, annihilating his escorts. Its weapons ignored shields. Its hull deflected everything his gunners threw at it. It moved like nothing he had ever seen, like something from a nightmare. This was not a ship. This was a demon. "All ships, retreat," he finally ordered. Fall back, regroup at the secondary position. But there was no retreat. The Blackstar blocked every escape route. Ships that tried to flee were cut down before they could engage their drives. Ships that tried to fight were destroyed in seconds. Ships that tried to surrender were ignored, their distress signals unanswered. The humans were not taking prisoners. In the first hour of battle, the Blackstar destroyed 150 ships. The Vethrak Armada, which had come to Earth expecting easy prey, lost half its strength to a single vessel. The greatest military force the Dominion had assembled in a century was being systematically dismantled by one ship and her crew. Daniel Cole stood at the center of his bridge, calm and focused, directing the destruction with quiet precision. He felt no joy in the killing, but he felt no hesitation either. These ships had come to murder his world. They had offered humanity a choice between slavery and death. Now they were learning there was a third option. They could face the Blackstar. Laura Bennett monitored the damage reports with growing concern. The ship was holding, but she was taking hits. Small ones, glancing blows that would have destroyed any other vessel. But damage was accumulating. "Captain," she said, "we cannot maintain this pace indefinitely. The ship needs time to repair." Daniel checked the tactical display. 150 enemy ships remained. Still a formidable force. Even scattered and afraid. "Then we need to end this faster," he said. He turned to Marcus. "Prepare the Nova warheads." 12. End quote. Prepare the Nova warheads. Marcus hesitated for just a moment. The Nova warheads were the most powerful weapons aboard the ship. They had never been used in combat. They had never been tested outside of simulations. "Understood, Captain," he said, and began the arming sequence. The battle was about to enter its final phase. Part 4. The Breaking Point. Admiral Keth Voran stood in the burning wreckage of his command center and tried to think. Half his fleet was gone. His warriors were broken. His commanders were either dead or refusing to answer his calls. The great invasion that was supposed to bring him glory had become a disaster beyond imagination, and still that black ship hunted them, appearing from nowhere, killing without mercy, vanishing before they could strike back. He had one option left. One terrible option that went against every principle of military strategy. But he was beyond strategy now. He was fighting for survival. If he could not destroy the demon ship, he would destroy its home. "All remaining vessels," he ordered through the emergency channel, "ignore the enemy vessel. Set course directly for Earth. Maximum speed. Prepare for planetary bombardment." His surviving captains hesitated. They knew what he was asking. Fly past the black ship. Accept losses. Get enough weapons within range of the human planet. And burn it all. If even 10 ships reached bombardment position, Earth would die. One by one, the remaining Vethrak warships acknowledged the order. Their engines flared to life. They broke from their defensive positions and raced toward the blue world, hanging in the distance. They were no longer trying to win the battle. They were trying to commit genocide before they died. On the bridge of the Blackstar, Vincent Perry saw the tactical shift immediately. "Captain, they are running for Earth. All remaining vessels. They are ignoring us and heading straight for the planet." Daniel felt his stomach drop. He had anticipated many strategies from the enemy, but not this. Not a suicide run aimed at destroying everything he was fighting to protect. "Can we intercept them all?" Vincent ran the calculations, his face growing pale. "At current speed and distribution, at least 15 vessels will reach bombardment range before we can destroy them. Possibly more. 1815. Bread Park. 15 ships. Each one carrying enough firepower to reduce a continent to glass. Even if the Blackstar destroyed every other vessel in the fleet, those 15 would be enough to murder billions." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Earth. He thought of the cities, the forests, the oceans. He thought of the people who had no idea what was happening in the darkness above them. Children sleeping in their beds, families eating dinner, lovers walking hand in hand under foreign stars. All of them would die if he failed. He opened his eyes and made a decision. "All hands. This is the captain." His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it that the crew had never heard before. The enemy has changed tactics. They are running for Earth with the intention of destroying the planet. We are the only thing standing between them and our home. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. I am going to ask you to do something dangerous. More dangerous than anything we have attempted so far. We are going to push this ship beyond her limits. Some of us may not survive, but if we fail, if we let even one of those ships reach Earth, then everyone we love will burn. He took a breath. Are you with me? The answers came without hesitation. Marcus at weapons, Katie at engineering, Vincent at tactical, Megan at communications, Chris at the helm, Laura beside him. We are with you, Captain. Daniel turned to Marcus. Authorization code Omega confirmed. Unlock all weapons, everything we have. No restrictions. Marcus entered the code with steady hands. Deep within the ship, systems that had been locked since construction began powering up. The Nova warheads, the gravity pulse emitters, the quantum disruption arrays, weapons that had been deemed too devastating for conventional warfare. Weapons that humanity had built in secret, hoping they would never need to use them. All systems unlocked and ready, Captain. Daniel turned to Katie. How much more can the engines give us? Katie looked at her readouts. The engines were already running at 120% capacity. The structural integrity field was straining. The power grid was overloaded. If I bypass the safety protocols and redirect all auxiliary power, I can give you another 30%. Maybe 40. She met his eyes. But the ship might not hold together. In the next time. When? If I bypass the safety protocols, the most builders. But the ship might not hold together. If I bypass the safety protocols, will she hold long enough? Katie smiled grimly. I will make sure she does. She began rerouting power, her fingers flying across the console. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The Blackstar groaned like a living thing in pain, but she accelerated. Chris Dalton felt the increased speed through his controls. The ship was moving faster than she had ever moved before. Faster than her designers had ever intended. He pushed her harder, threading through the scattered Vethrak formation. Chasing the ships that were racing toward Earth, the first wave of enemies came within weapons range. Marcus opened fire with everything he had. The Cascade missiles screamed into the void, multiplying as they flew, overwhelming point defense systems. The antimatter lances carved through hulls. The railguns punched holes through armor plating. Ship after ship exploded, their crews never knowing what hit them. But more ships kept running. They knew they were going to die. They did not care. They only wanted to reach Earth first. Vincent tracked the enemy movements with desperate precision. 20 ships destroyed. 30 remaining on course for Earth. Distance to bombardment range. 8 minutes. 8 minutes. 8 minutes to destroy 30 ships that were fleeing in all directions. The math was impossible. Daniel refused to accept it. Nova warheads, he ordered. Target the largest concentration. Marcus selected 3 targets and fired. The warheads streaked away from the ship, carrying payloads that humanity had never dared to use. They detonated in the center of a Vethrak formation. For exactly 4.7 seconds, 3 miniature stars burned in the darkness of space. The light was blinding, overwhelming every sensor within 1,000 kilometers. The heat was beyond measurement, vaporizing metal and flesh instantly. The radiation swept outward in waves that scrambled electronics and cooked anything biological. When the stars faded, 18 ships were gone. Not destroyed. Gone. There was no wreckage. No debris. Just empty space. Where they had been. 18 kills confirmed, Vincent reported, his voice shaking slightly. 12 ships remaining. Distance to bombardment range, 4 minutes. 12 ships, 4 minutes. It was still impossible, but it was closer to possible than before. The Blackstar screamed through space, her hull glowing from the stress of her speed. Katie watched her engineering displays with growing horror. The engines were on the verge of failure. The structural integrity field was fluctuating. The power grid was seconds away from collapse. She refused to let the ship die. Not yet. Not until the job was done. She made adjustments that violated every principle of engineering she had ever learned. She took risks that should have killed them all. She kept the ship running through sheer force of will. Chris dodged enemy fire that should have been unavoidable. He performed maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart. He pushed himself and the Blackstar to limits that no pilot had ever reached. Marcus fired without stopping, his weapons console a blur of activity. Every shot counted. Every kill brought them closer to victory. Megan intercepted enemy communications and fed targeting data to the weapons systems. The Vethrak were panicking, screaming at each other, trying to coordinate a defense that was already shattered. Laura stood beside Daniel, monitoring everything, adjusting priorities, keeping the crew focused on what mattered. And Daniel watched the tactical display as the number of enemy ships dropped. 12 became 10. 10 became 7. 7 became 4. 2 minutes to bombardment range, Vincent called out. 4 ships remaining. 4 ships. 2 minutes. It was going to be close. Too close. The Blackstar caught up to 2 more vessels and destroyed them in seconds. The antimatter lances cut through their engines, and the Cascade missiles finished them off. 2 ships left. 1 minute to bombardment range. One of the ships was hit by a railgun volley and began spinning out of control. Its crew tried to stabilize, but the damage was too severe. It exploded before it could fire a single shot at Earth. 1 ship left. 30 seconds. The last Vethrak vessel was small and fast. A destroyer that had somehow survived the carnage. Its captain had pushed his engines to the breaking point. Determined to complete his mission. Even if it killed him, it would. Daniel calculated the angles. The Blackstar could not reach the destroyer in time. Not with conventional weapons. Not with conventional tactics. But there was one option left. Chris, he said calmly. Ram them. Chris did not hesitate. He adjusted course and pushed the engines one final time. The Blackstar slammed into the Vethrak destroyer at a fraction of the speed of light. The impact was catastrophic. The destroyer was obliterated instantly, torn apart by the collision. The Blackstar's forward hull crumpled. Compartments decompressed. Systems failed throughout the ship, but she survived. Katie screamed as her console exploded in sparks. Laura grabbed a railing to keep from being thrown across the bridge. Marcus was knocked from his chair. Megan hit her head and saw stars. Daniel stayed on his feet, watching the tactical display. The last red dot was gone. No enemy ships remained between the Blackstar and Earth. All targets destroyed, Vincent reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Bombardment threat eliminated. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Katie began laughing, a sound of pure relief and exhaustion. Marcus pulled himself back into his chair, his hands shaking. Megan touched the blood on her forehead and smiled anyway. They had done it. They had saved Earth. But the battle was not over yet. Admiral Kethvaran's flagship still survived, floating in the wreckage of his fleet, surrounded by his last defenders. Daniel looked at the damage reports flooding his screen. The Blackstar was badly hurt. Half her weapons were offline. Her engines were failing. Her hull was breached in a dozen places, but she could still fight. Find me the Admiral's flagship, he ordered. We are going to finish this. Part 5. No survivors. Admiral Kethvaran watched the last of his bombardment ships disappear from his sensors. The human destroyer, the black demon that had slaughtered his fleet, had rammed his final vessel rather than let it reach Earth. He had never seen anything like it. He had never imagined such reckless, furious determination. For the first time in his long life, Kethvaran understood that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not weak. They were not primitives waiting to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that would rather die than surrender. His flagship, the Dominion's Fury, floated in a graveyard of broken ships. Around him, perhaps 30 vessels remained from his mighty armada. Most were damaged. All were terrified. The crews who had come to Earth expecting easy victory were now praying to gods they had forgotten, and the black ship was coming for them. Kethvorin could see it on his sensors, limping through the debris field, wounded but not dead. It moved slowly now, its hull torn open in places, its weapons flickering. But it still moved. It still hunted. "Admiral," his first officer said carefully, "we should retreat. Regroup. Return with reinforcements." Kethvorin shook his head. "Retreat to where? The humans have seen what they can do. They will never fear us again." He looked at the approaching ship with something like respect. "And the Dominion does not forgive failure. If I return without Earth, I am already dead." He straightened his armor and made his final decision. "All ships, attack formation. Target that vessel and destroy it. We end this now. One way or another." His surviving captains obeyed, though he could hear the fear in their acknowledgments. 30 warships turned toward the Blackstar and accelerated. On the bridge of the Blackstar, Daniel Cole watched the enemy form up for their final attack. The ship was barely holding together. Half the crew was injured. 3 compartments had been sealed off due to hull breaches. The engines were running on emergency power only, but they were still alive. And they still had weapons. "Status report," he ordered. Laura checked her displays. 40% of crew wounded, 17 dead. Medical teams are overwhelmed. Katie spoke next, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Engines at 30%. Structural integrity holding. Barely. We have maybe an hour before the power grid fails completely." Marcus examined his weapons console. Forward railguns destroyed in the collision. Port antimatter lance offline. Starboard lance at 50%. Cascade missiles exhausted. We have 6 Nova warheads remaining and partial drone capacity. Vincent studied the tactical display. 30 enemy ships approaching in attack formation. They are concentrating fire. Estimated time to weapons range: 4 minutes. Daniel processed the information quickly. They were outgunned and outmaneuvered. The Blackstar could not run, could not dodge, could barely fight. A conventional engagement would end in their destruction. But Daniel had not survived this long by fighting conventionally. "Chris, take us straight at them. Maximum speed." Chris stared at him. "Captain, the ship cannot take another collision." "I know. We are not going to collide." Daniel turned to Marcus. "When we reach optimal range, deploy all remaining Nova warheads in a spread pattern. Then launch every drone we have left." Marcus understood immediately. "You want to create a wall of destruction. Force them to scatter or die. If they scatter, we pick them off. If they die, we win." Daniel looked at his crew. "Either way, this ends here." Laura moved to stand beside him. "And if they do not scatter? If they push through anyway?" Daniel met her eyes. "Then we make sure we take as many of them with us as possible." She nodded slowly. "Understood, Captain." The Blackstar surged forward, her battered hull groaning under the acceleration. The Vethrak fleet opened fire, filling the space ahead with energy beams and missiles. Chris dodged what he could and absorbed what he could not. New damage reports flooded the bridge. More systems failed. More crew members died. But the ship kept coming. Kethvorin watched the human vessel charge directly at his fleet and felt a chill run down his spine. The ship was crippled. It should have been trying to escape, to preserve itself, to survive. Instead, it was attacking. What kind of species did this? What kind of madness drove them? "Concentrate fire," he screamed. "Destroy it now." The Blackstar reached optimal range. Marcus pressed the firing controls. 6 Nova warheads launched in a spreading pattern, forming a wall of death that stretched across the path of the Vethrak fleet. Behind them came hundreds of drones, each one carrying enough explosive power to cripple a warship. The warheads detonated. 6 miniature stars burned in the void, creating a barrier of light and heat that nothing could survive. The Vethrak fleet had a choice: break formation and scatter, or fly into the fire. Most chose to scatter. Discipline collapsed as captains fought for survival, their ships breaking in every direction. their formations dissolving into chaos, but some chose the fire. Loyal warriors who believed they could push through, who thought their shields would hold, who were too brave or too foolish to run. They were wrong. 18 ships flew into the wall of destruction. None emerged. The Nova fire consumed them completely, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas. The survivors scattered into the drone swarm. Tiny machines latched onto hulls, crawled into engine ports, found weak points in armor plating. They detonated in sequence, tearing ships apart from the inside. 5 more vessels died in the drones. 2 more collided while trying to avoid them. 1 captain surrendered, cutting his engines and broadcasting his submission. Daniel ignored the surrender. The Vethrak had offered none to humanity. He would offer none in return. The remaining starboard antimatter lance came online one final time. A thin beam of annihilation reached out and touched the surrendering vessel. It vanished in a flash of light. 4 ships remained: the Dominion's Fury and 3 escorts. The Blackstar closed the distance, moving slowly but relentlessly, like a wounded predator that refused to die. Her remaining weapons charged for one final engagement. Keth Voran stood on his burning bridge and watched death approach. Around him, his officers were dead or dying. His ship was crippled. His escorts were fleeing, abandoning him to save themselves. He could run. He could try to escape. But where would he go? Back to the Dominion? To face execution for his failure? Into exile? To live as a broken coward? No. He would die here, facing the enemy that had destroyed everything he had built. He would die as a warrior, not a fugitive. He opened a channel to the human vessel. "Human captain," he said, his voice steady despite everything. "I am Admiral Keth Voran of the Vethrak Dominion. You have defeated my fleet and destroyed my invasion. I acknowledge your victory." He paused. "But before I die, I must know. What are you? What manner of beings could build such a weapon? Could fight with such fury?" Daniel considered the question for a moment before answering. "We are human," he said simply. "We are what happens when you threaten our home." He closed the channel and gave the final order. The antimatter lance fired one last time. The beam struck the Dominion's Fury and burned through her core. The great flagship of the Vethrak invasion crumpled inward, her power systems failing, her hull collapsing. Admiral Keth Voran died in the fire, along with his dreams of conquest. The 3 fleeing escorts were picked off by Earth's defense fleet, which had finally caught up to the battle. Commander Patricia Lane personally directed the destruction of the last vessel, avenging the fear and helplessness she had felt hours earlier. When it was over, when the last Vethrak ship was nothing but debris, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. 300 warships had come to Earth. None survived. The Blackstar drifted among the wreckage, her crew exhausted beyond words. Katie had somehow kept the ship alive through impossible damage. Chris had piloted her through maneuvers that should have killed them all. Marcus had fired every weapon until nothing remained. Megan had documented everything, sending the images across the galaxy. Vincent had tracked every enemy until none were left. And Laura had stood beside Daniel through it all, the steady presence that kept him focused when everything seemed lost. Daniel looked at his crew. These remarkable people who had followed him into hell and brought him back alive. They had saved Earth. They had destroyed an empire's pride. They had proven that humanity was not prey. "Well done," he said quietly. "All of you." There would be medals later. Ceremonies. Speeches. The galaxy would learn what happened here, and everything would change. But for now, in this quiet moment among the wreckage, there was only exhaustion and relief, and the simple knowledge that they had won. The Blackstar limped toward Earth, toward home, toward a future that suddenly seemed possible. Within a week, the Vethrak Dominion sent a new message to humanity. Not a threat, not a demand, just a single word that echoed across the galaxy: peace. Other empires took notice. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitives suddenly wanted treaties, alliances, trade agreements. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. Humanity could be reasoned with. They could be befriended. They could be trusted, but never threatened. Those who threatened humanity faced the wrath of ships like the Blackstar. And no one who faced that wrath ever survived. The universe had many wonders and many dangers. But somewhere among the stars, humanity stood watch, ready to defend their corner of existence with everything they had. And in the endless dark, the Blackstar waited, a promise and a warning to anyone who might consider Earth an easy target. Touch our home, and nothing will save you. The end.